Is there a dark side to being in heating and air or in in-home sales, and why does it matter? This is a super important question. I'm Scott Silverbell, coming to you live from Sacramento, California on a perfect day to talk about sales and business and a perfect day to talk about you. We are on video number 2. So here's the thing. I outlined an expansive amount of information for you about companies, about inside of what you do. Now, that was the interior. This would be what I would consider the exterior of the dark side of heating and air. And we're going to start with affinity groups. And affinity groups are supposed to really help you. And if you don't know what that is, you know, there's a bunch of companies will get together and they'll share best practices, best services, marketing, training, coaching, and there is a ton of benefit to it. But I want to let you know there is a sideways effect that causes a lot of problems in ethics. It causes a lot of problems in sales. It causes a lot of problems in trust later on down the road. And it comes down to this. It comes down to awards. It comes down to bragging rights. And so I've seen quite a few companies go down this path where they're doing good, they're crushing it. They join an affinity group, and the affinity group says, hey, the real way for us to make this work and the real way for us to make this happen is you make sure that one of your people is consistently on the stage. And that's the thing that everybody aims to. And what ends up happening is the numbers become more important than anything else. And so dude or chick that's up on the stage is the person who gets the calls, the person who's fed the leads, the person who gets everything so that a manager or a business owner can go sit at a bar. And my guy over there, he's a $5 million guy. And then somebody else, oh, my guy over there is a $7 million guy. And so what ends up happening is for 30, 45, 50 seconds, once a quarter, once every 6 months, the guys get to sit belly to belly at the bar and talk their trash. But what they don't realize is they burn out the rest of the team. Yep, they do. They might have, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 million, $10 million dude or chick. And, but to get that person there, they burned everybody else. Now, I want to be very clear. There are salespeople out there that have the skills to hit 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 million a year. But a lot of times, when you see these big numbers on a stage, it wasn't necessarily only skill that got some of these people here. So like, I'm not throwing shade at the dudes and the chicks who are really closers. I am saying there are people out there that get the benefit of a manager moving some calls and leads their way. And we all know what happens, right? So like, it's funny. I'll meet with business owners and like, they don't want to admit to it. Nope, it doesn't happen. Talk to their team and you're like, yeah, during the day, I'm actually the one that moves all those calls so that happens. So does it happen? Absolutely. So what ends up happening is these companies will trade ethics for bragging rights. They'll trade how they treat their employees for bragging rights. They'll trade how they treat their team for 20 seconds of fame, right? For a minute of fame. And I've been through multiple versions of affinity groups. You know, when I got started in the early 2000s, there was one, and then, you know, mid 2000s, there was 2, and then there was a third one. And then I've seen a lot of them. There's a lot of good that comes from them, but there's also some bad. And this right here is why you should join HVAC Tech Secrets. I'll give you the goods, not in the Facebook group, not in the YouTube channel. So at the end of the day, what ends up happening is teams get cannibalized for the sake of having numbers. Now, part number 2 of this video is some bad. And I want to be very clear that not all consultants, not all sales trainers, not all coaches are bad, okay? There's some really good people out there that do awesome things. And so what happens is there are some coaches, trainers, consultants, and I'm going to use that term very loosely, consultants, right? They come in and they push this model. And, you know, what happens is they get a good paycheck. Yep, good for them. Fantastic. But then they have to prove results. And so, you know, what ends up happening is they come in and they change the models, they change the structure, they change the business, they change how everything's going, and because they got to prove their money. But what happens is a lot of times what they put in place is not sustainable. It's sustainable today and maybe 6 months, but it causes a lot of fallout. It causes a bunch of employees to quit. It causes, you know, key people to be moved around. It's shenanigans at its finest. And so what ends up happening to make all of this work, they got to come in and build a team. Okay, so team building in the positive sense is you go to events and you learn how to communicate. Team building in a positive sense is you work through your struggles and you work through your problem. That's not the team building I'm talking about. I'm talking about the evil team building where they pit you against somebody who is your friend. And the reason why they're doing this is, like, think in terms of magic. If I'm going to do a magic trick over here, I need to misdirect you and I need you to get some pay attention over here. And so some of these scumbag consultant coaches and trainers will come in, and what they'll do is they'll create a bunch of chaos over here so you don't see what's going on over here, right? And as an employee, what you see is this, and as management, they're running the Kansas City Shuffle, right? They're playing some games. They are playing some huge games, and it's all on the structure to make their paycheck work, right? If they were honest about what they were going to do, they probably wouldn't get feedback. So they go in, they create a whole bunch of chaos over here so you don't see what they're doing over here. Make sense, right? Hope it does. It's shenanigans at its finest. It's what they do. So then they build factions. And so if you have a consultant, loose term, come in and you see that they start building a team, like, be aware that for some people, it's not going to turn out very well. For some people, it's not going to be very happy. And I've seen multiple iterations of this. I've been around multiple iterations of this, and it's like, it's a gag. It sucks, right? So what ends up happening is they turn and they pit people against each other. And they have their ideas and they have their processes, but in order to make it work, they've got to change management structure. Right? So like they've got to rebuild the house. They've got to remodel the house because owner is like, we paid you a ton of money. We paid you money. We want to see change. So they go in and they start treating people like it's a chessboard. They pit employees against employees, managers against managers. They get people to get fired, or they come in and demand people get fired. And they say, hey, if you don't fire this dude or this chick, then here's all the repercussions, or this is your role and this is your responsibility. I just tell you right now, it's not pretty. It's not nice. And at the end of the day, most of the time, whatever they put in place doesn't last. It really doesn't. And you're like, Scott, aren't you a consultant? Are you a trainer? Absolutely. I am. Right? But isn't it a job of a salesperson ultimately, or a consultant ultimately, say, let me show you the good and the bad? Yeah, that's all I'm doing. There are some fantastic consultants, fantastic coaches, fantastic trainers. There are. Are there a bunch that suck? You bet there are. Right? So here's what happens. And if you don't know this, and like you are on a big team and you work for a big company, normally what happens is consultant comes in and says, hey, here's all the changes that we got to make. They shift players around. And then what they do to shake up the teams is they look at somebody and they go, dude, chick, bro, babe, you're now the manager. Guess what? It's time to sacrifice somebody. And we have picked, name the person, right? They name the person and like, here's the person that we picked, and here's the person we want you to get rid of under these circumstances, under these guidances. It's not fair. It's not right. And usually the person who is let go ultimately they were on the line of fire. I talked about this in video number 1. It's like they did nothing wrong. They wasn't anything that they did. It wasn't anything that they caused. Their collateral damage. And the way that the consultant looks at it is like, well, they got a life. They'll be able to continue on. But it puts a ton of pressure on the now managers and the other employees to follow through with crappy directives. So they don't have to deal with that upheaval. But they get celebrated because for a couple of months, their numbers were fantastic. But what nobody talks about is those numbers don't last. And so what happens? Well, you go to the affinity group and you go, well, who's the consultant to talk to? And then you know what? This circus starts all over again. Somebody comes out. They get these people over here to fight against these people. They create a distraction over here so you're not seeing what's going on over here. Then they bring in a different manager, somebody that they know, somebody that they like, somebody that they trust, somebody that's amazing. And so like you're like, hey, Scott, why is this the dark side? It's because when you have a good company, when you have a good organization, and there are, and the employees don't know what's going to happen, and the management doesn't know what's going to happen, and then the owners have outlaid a ton of cash, a ton of moolah. They're like, we want to see some sort of effort, and they don't realize the game that's being played. It's the Kansas City Shuffle when it comes to business. So is there a dark side to heating and air? Yes. Why do you need to know about this? Because let's say that this is you, that you are a growing company. Fantastic. That's amazing. That's a good thing. And consultant Scumbag consultant. Scumbag consultant comes in, or scumbag trainer comes in, and this is the game that they're playing. Like, anybody who really preaches off of fear really doesn't have anything to teach. Like, they should be able to paint both sides of the rainbow, right? But there's a lot of times when they come in and if you don't do this, here's all the bad things that are going to happen. Right? You'll gag on it. I promise it sucks. There's been times in my life, things that I wish I could relive, things that I wish that I could redo, but damn it. You know, dark sides of heating and air and in-home services, there you go. Oh, and you're like, hey, Scott, what do I do about it? Well, you have opportunities to stay. You have opportunities to change position, but there's a cost to that, right? There's emotional toll, there's physical toll, there's mental toll. And then there's times where you look and you're like, I really don't want to put up with it, and I'm going to get off the ship before everybody else does. That's the entire range of options. Stay, make changes in the company, leave the company. There's nothing else. There's three. But it's something to be aware of. The circus, we're going to cause a disruption. We're going to cause a disruption over here so you don't see what's going on over here, is one of the most common plays. And it's a sign that you're dealing with a scumbag. Just so you know. Just so you know. You're like, hey, Scott, how do I tell I'm dealing with a scumbag? You got the information. You got one of three things to do from here. Just one of three. Find the subscribe button. Click on it. Every time I send out a video, you'll get an update. 2, hit follow. 3, you know what you got to do. Share this video with a friend. We'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.